Forum podcast. So, we're a show that guides leaders on how to elevate the workplace. We believe that people are at the heart of successful organizations, and team members' well being, their rewards, their career development, it's all essential to a happy and healthy and highly productive workplace. So, this show discusses the practical and effective leadership strategies for top executives, senior professionals, and talent managers overall. So I'd like to introduce you to a few people today. First of all, we have on our show, we have Howard Niswitz. Howard is a seasoned compensation and HR consultant with over 30 years of experience. And so we're very fortunate to have him here. Also, we have Shar Miller, and she's a people strategist, consultant. She's been a chief human resources officer at a number of organizations out there, and she is a serial entrepreneur. She does a lot of her own work, and now she's doing some talent management as well with Rich Horwath. So in Shar, you can tell us a little bit more about that as we're diving into the details of today's discussion, because I know a lot of it overlaps with what we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you.
So today on the People Strategy Forum, we welcome Paul Falcone. He is the founder of Workplace Leadership Consulting. So Paul has a rich history as a former CHRO of Nickelodeon and also the head of international human resources at Paramount Pictures. So he brings a wealth of knowledge from his high stakes role in entertainment and in finance and all those different areas that Paul has shined in. So we're looking forward to hearing all about Paul. Now, one thing that you probably know about Paul Falcone is that he is a writer of many sorts. He writes books like crazy. He's got, I don't know, how many books do you have out there, Paul, right now?
17, Sam. Thank you for asking.
17 books. It took me 10 years just to get my first book off the ground, and here you're writing them like they're nothing. So I'm glad to hear that these thoughts just roll off the mind into the page for you, Paul, because we're going to dive in deeply into those today. So we're going to be sharing about Paul's experience in navigating those complex leadership challenges, drawing from his vast experience and his deep understanding of corporate dynamics. So let's get ready to talk about managing in a time of crisis. So, and specifically around Paul's book, that the First Time Manager Leading Through Crisis, as I'm showing here. So, Paul, I know that you just got done speaking at the SHRM conference. How did that go?
Oh, well. I think they had about 25,000 people there. It's amazing in Chicago at the conference center, the convention center. And SHRM just puts on the biggest show in the world. And they come from all over the globe to attend those webinars and seminars and whatnot. So it was an honor to be there. Thank you for asking. It went great.
Yes, good. And I know before we dive into just a little bit more about the conference and what the themes that you saw there, I'd love to just hear a little bit of a story about how you got to where you are today, and why did you decide or what drove you to write all the books that you write?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I kind of had parallel lives, you guys. It was so funny because I've been writing since the late 90s. And I became a columnist for SHRM, and I was writing with the American Management Association. Their book publishing division was called Amicom Books, which was great. They did my first 10 books, but in 2018, they sold their books division to HarperCollins. So HarperCollins created a new imprint called HarperCollins Leadership, and I've written 7 books with them. So the 10 plus 7 gets you to the 17, which was really cool. And the most recent book that I wrote, which came out last month in May, they put on there over 775,000 books sold by this author. And I was like, whoa, I never realized. It was nice of them to put the number in. It was a little overwhelming, I have to say, but it's nice to know that for all those books, the message is getting out there and it's finding traction globally. And that pleases me to no end. But again, Sam, to answer your question, I had my corporate career path for 3 decades. But I was writing on the side, and I always wanted my corporate experience to inform my writing. So even the way I chose the companies that I wrote for or that I worked with, I wanted to make sure I was hitting across multiple industries for me, which was entertainment, healthcare, and financial services. I wanted large cap Fortune 500. I wanted small startup. I wanted in between. I wanted for-profit, nonprofit, union, non-union. I really wanted to touch all that stuff to the degree that I could, because I thought it would inform my writing, and ultimately it did. So here we are. That takes me to today. So you're all caught up.
Yeah. So, well, the one thing is that there's plenty of professionals out there that know a lot. They're very experienced, and but having a person that is really wants to share their knowledge with the world as you have, and giving that advice through. I imagine millions of people have touched your books, and so is has there? I mean, do you have a sense of really wanting to give back? I mean, what was the driver of really going that route?
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I mean, at my heart, what I love doing is what I'm doing now. As of 2 years ago, I kind of kicked off the corporate training wheel, so to speak. And now I have my own consulting firm, and I specialize in management training.
Hmm.
But I love teaching. I taught at UCLA Extension and their School of Business and Management at night for years, decades, actually. And so much of this stuff is easier than we're making it. And I keep trying to get that message out there. It's like, you be the average bear. You know, how would you feel if someone spoke to you in that particular way? Or as an executive coach nowadays, I sit with the clients and I'm like, be honest, would you want to work for you?
Hmm.
And that's not an easy question. They kind of look at me like, well, and the follow-up question, it's like, if the whole company followed your lead in terms of your behavior, your conduct, would you be happy with where you took it?
Yeah.
It's hard. They're not easy questions to answer, but it's about driving that career introspection, Sam. I think that makes a really big difference.
I know. I think that's been in the past 5, maybe 7 years, where managers have really entertained the idea of self-reflection and thinking about, hey, how do I show up? I think that the old-fashioned leadership style was almost like a bull in a china shop. But now I think that there's a lot of wisdom that managers and leaders are starting to think about. How they're showing up and how they're coming off to people. We've heard a lot of things about, from vulnerability to self-reflection to gratitude and so forth. So where do you see the trends going?
Right where you just said, because I'll tell you what, every generation gets to redefine the workplace, just like I did. I was a young baby boomer. I was born in 1963. The baby boom ended in 1964 with the introduction of the birth control pill. My mother always told me, honey, you made it by that much. I'm like, Mom, that's a little TMI. Too much information. That's okay. But the reality is, when you look at Gen Y, the millennials, the 45 and under crowd, and you look at the Zoomers, the Gen Z, the 25 and under crowd, these are the most studied generational cohorts in world history, thanks to the universities and the think tanks and the big 4 accounting firms and the big 3 management consulting firms. They're studied, and we know what they want. And career and professional development comes up as one of their top 3 or top 5 core priorities in every survey that I've seen. So the reality is, what they're looking for when you talk about career and professional development is also about that sense of giving. What am I giving forward? What am I giving away? What am I paying forward? And I think that's driving the career introspection. But the truth of the matter is, we should have been doing this a long time ago. We're not 100 years ago where the jalopy would come off of the conveyor belt. The manager or the line supervisor had all the answers, and the employees would run up to get time card approval and ask questions. In today's, intellectual-based economy, your workers know better than you do what's going on. They know the clients better. They know the system problems better. They know where the hangups are. Your job isn't to know the job better than them. Your job is to make it safe for them to have enough self-confidence that they can make themselves vulnerable in a healthy sense, share ideas, come up with solutions. And that's what the innovation movement is all about. It's not a top-down management approach. It's not management over, it's leadership through. And it's knowing how to get the best out of your workers that's really going to make the difference, especially with these younger cohorts, these younger generations. So it's just wisdom. But I'll tell you this too, Sam, we've lost the ability somehow as a society to sit around the campfire and pass wisdom from the elders down to the younger generations. We're too busy. We're looking at our iPhones and going crazy with all that stuff. But the reality is, we've got to make the space to do that. And that's what staff meetings are about. And that's what one-on-one meetings are about. So that's what I like to talk about in a lot of my sessions and in my books.
Well, you may say that it's too busy, but I think that you're a testament of actually taking the time to doing that. And I mean, with all the books you've written, and you've made it a priority. What were you going to say, Howard?
Yeah, I was going to say, is this where technology is sort of a double-edged sword? On one hand, it facilitates a lot of, knowledge and analysis that we couldn't otherwise do quickly. But on the opposite end, it eliminates a lot of that face-to-face, down to heart-to-heart conversations that people want to have.
Yeah, very much so, Howard. So when I was in my last job, I was the CHRO of what was known as the Motion Picture and Television Fund. Mm-hmm. And MPTF. MPTF was primarily a retirement home for everybody in the entertainment business. But it's more than that: social services, community services, these kinds of things. But we had a professor from University of Southern California giving a presentation to us. And he said, "Everyone, I have to ask you a question. Who's the loneliest, most isolated, and most depressed generation on the planet right now?" And we all raised our hands and we said, "The people who live here in the retirement homes." Mm-hmm. He said, "Wrong. That's number 2. The number 1 group is Gen Z, the Zoomers, the 25 and under crowd." He said they are the first truly digital generation. And because of that, a lot of the socialization was missed. It used to be that when I would call you, Howard, to see, you're my friend, so I'm going to call you. There was only one phone in your home.
Right.
Your mom and dad answered it. And I'd say, "Hello, Mrs. Cleaver. This is Paul Falcone. How are you, ma'am?" And, you'd have that kind of communication. And then cell phone went from child to child. Mm-hmm. And then the next iteration was they stopped using it as a phone and they only use it to IM and to text each other. Yeah. And that isolation is real. And, there's an app for that. Is a wonderful idea. It could be really great at augmenting things. But the reality is there's no app in the world that's supposed to give bad feedback or negative feedback to somebody. Mm-hmm. That's still going to come from that human touch. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so you want to make sure that the leadership skills, the communication skills are getting stronger as the technology is getting stronger. Otherwise, we're going to be consumed by this stuff. And that would be a big mistake for society as a whole and the business world in particular.
And COVID only made it worse.
And COVID only made it worse because when you take the Gen Zers in particular who missed their high school graduations, and some of us would argue their funnest years, their high school years or their college years were taken away. It breaks my heart, but this is their reality. Right. And COVID made it worse when you think of isolation and loneliness and being pent up in the house. Now, Howard, to your point, what we struggle with is this return to work movement. Mm-hmm. Do they come back now? Do they stay remote? They're hybrid, but they're 2 days a week. Do we go to 3 days a week and possibly 4 days a week? And, this is all part of building the plane while we're flying it. This is all part of this post-COVID reintegration phase that we're in. And it's not easy. We have no blueprint for it. We're figuring it out as we go, which leads to that crisis mentality that I think a lot of people are suffering from these days.
Great.
Well, let's dive into that a bit. I mean, I know we've been talking a little bit about some of the, the rapid changes that have been going on in the world and also causing, as a result of crisis and also causing crisis as well. So let's back down to the essence of what we're talking about today, managing in a state of crisis. And so something happens, whether it's a pandemic or a calamity of some sort, war, or simply just a tough economy, and companies are suffering for it. Managers have to make tough decisions and lead through this. So tell us a little bit about the book and the inspiration around the book of managing in crisis there, Paul.
When I was so there's a little story to it, Sam. There was a book out there called The First Time Manager. Back in the days when AMACOM was the library of the American Management Association, and this was in the 80s, the book came out. And I think at this point, it's in its 7th edition. It sold over 500,000 copies. It still shows up as a #1 bestseller. I mean, it's a fabulous book. I read the book when I was preparing. So HarperCollins then buys the AMA library in 2018, creates the new imprint, HarperCollins Leadership. And one of the things they say is this book is selling so well, let's use it and build it as an umbrella, and let's build titles under it. So they said to me, "Paul, would you write the book First Time Manager HR?" And I said, "I would love to write that book." And by the way, that came out in May, just came about a month ago. But they said, before you write them, we want to write a book that can pair with all the other books. So someone picks up the book, First Time Manager Sales. But they see, oh, but I also want this other first-time manager book, Paul. Could you please give some thought to what that should be? And I said, I don't have to give any thought to it. I know the answer. Leading through crisis and disruption. We're all in that mode of our wires are exposed. We are going through really, really intense times right now. You see it reflected in politics. You see globally, not just in the United States. There's a lot of change going on. There's more movement at the borders of the industrialized nations now than in any time since the end of World War II. I mean, we're going through massive, massive change out there. And so your reality becomes, since everyone is at this point now healing from COVID, still aware that it exists, but also trying to figure out what are our next steps going forward, that's the book that I want to write. And they said, that sounds like a good idea. So this one came out in September. And then the new book, First Time Manager HR, the newest book, number 17 for me, came out in May. So just about 6 months apart, 8 months apart, something along those lines. But that's how it all came about. I figured, let's make lemonade out of lemons. We're all going through a hard time together. Let's see if we can write to today's real needs for managers. It's not even just for first-time managers. It's part of that series, and I get it. But the book could have just been leading through crisis and disruption, because that's really where we're at these days. And we have to be that calming influence. The leadership wisdom is taking the knowledge, but applying it. I would say wisdom is knowledge applied. It's taking it to the next level and being there to make sure your employees feel heard and feel like you've got their backs, and them feeling like they've got that, whatever you want to call it, psychological safety. When I come to work every day, I can do my best work with peace of mind. And that's the standard question I ask managers all the time. Ask your employees in your one-on-ones, are you able to do your very best work every day with peace of mind? And see where it goes, because you're going to find out some real insightful responses when you ask that question.
So we just started up the conversation today talking about the past 7 years and how leadership has changed. It's changed to be more sensitive. It's changed to be more people-centric. And then now we're put into a hard time. And we've now all of our employees love us as leaders, and in some places friends and so forth. And then we're told that we need to cut. We need to cut. The revenue has gone down, sales has gone down. We're in hard times as an economy, and now we're having an internal crisis, right? How do we handle that?
Yeah. So and the way I structured this book is basically in 3 parts. Part 1 is individual crises that happen with your staff members. Part 2 is team and departmental crises. And part 3 is what you're talking about, company crisis or societal crises. And so when you're talking about companies going through downsizing, it's really, really rough. I come out of the entertainment industry. I was at Paramount Pictures and Nickelodeon for 10 years as part of Viacom. Paramount's, I don't know if you're aware, but it's been on the selling block. 2 different attempts to sell it, both fell through. What's going to happen next? Are they going to break it up? There's so many things out there that are happening, and people are afraid, not just the fact that they can lose their job, but they can lose their way of life. Because if my career was in an industry that's kind of imploding or melting, what does that say for my ability? I can't go to another studio because the studios are going through the same challenges. Fox is already gone. It's part of Disney. What's going to happen to Paramount? We don't know. Are there only going to be 2 or 3 studios left as opposed to 6 or 7 when all is said and done? But this massive conglomeration that's going on is a real movement. And so this idea of this M&A HR, right? The mergers and acquisitions piece, and how do you be a calming influence through that when you know people who, let's face it, you love them. They're on your team. You've become friends with some of them. And either you know that your job is on the line, or you probably are going to have to cut people in your own staff. You've got to find that balance in yourself first. And while you can't promise unlimited money and promotions to anybody these days under any circumstances, you've got to help them see the bigger picture. And what I talk to managers about at the companies where I've worked and when I do my training sessions is taking your employees to the 30,000 foot level. You got to get them out of the weeds. We all live in the weeds day in and day out. But the problem is if you stay in the weeds for too long, you feel like you're in a pinball machine and you're getting banged left, right, and center. You don't even see the next move coming. Get them up to that 30,000 foot view so they can look down on what's happening and just take a breather and see things a little bit more objectively or dispassionately or however you want to say it, so that they understand what's happening isn't personal. Also, when you're at the 30,000 foot view, you can look ahead. much more clearly. You can see better where things are moving. Now, yes, after a meeting like that, you got to bring them back down to the weeds because that's where we live. But you'll be surprised. There's these little exercises that you can do with your employees to get them thinking about, where do I want to go with my career if? Let's just assume worst case scenario, you guys. How are we going to have one another's backs? How are we going to help each other through? Are we going to feel survivor's guilt? That's real. Yet at the same time, how are we going to help all of us get to their next job that much more quickly? You got to talk about it. You got to hold it under the lamp and don't run away from these things. I think the more that you as a leader and an excellent communicator can share what everyone is thinking, it's the 800-pound gorilla, but no one seems to want to mention it. It's like, just talk about this stuff. It happens. It's a rite of passage. We all get laid off these days. Who hasn't been laid off? I mean, to find someone who's been with the same company for 40 years is rare. And I know we all know that. But the reality becomes what companies are looking for is agility. They want to see people that can bounce back on their feet. They want to see people that can kind of deal with those kinds of setbacks. As a good leader and coach, I'm helping my employees develop that agile mindset. I don't want them to be afraid of these changes, whether it's here at this company or anywhere else. That's the gift that I can give, peace of mind, and making sure that they have greater self-confidence and helping them by knowing that I can help them get this. What do you want to build onto your resume? I don't know how much time we have, but you can get that exposure here. I can make it safe for you to do here. Or maybe you want to get certified in something and focus on educational or technical. You tell me what you want to do and we'll help get there. That's a boss I'd like to think that you won't forget very, very, very quickly. Because even though you're all going through adversity and that boss may be the one to lose his or her job, they're still coming from that selfless leadership standpoint. And it makes a tremendous difference when people feel vulnerable.
So a boss, a leader that thinks about that cares about their people to an extent and saying, hey, well, I'm sorry, your job has to go. They're really diving in and saying, this is what we can do to make that transition more successful for you. They're taking the extra step of looking beyond the particular situation at hand and seeing how they can go forward together in a way where they're collaborating. Is that's what I'm hearing from you, Paul?
Very much. And the funny thing too, Sam, is, some companies have separation packages and severance. Some companies will give you outplacement service. Some companies have nothing to give. Whatever, that may be a budget issue. What I'm saying is, regardless of that, you create your own ecosystem as a leader. And as an HR person, when I talk to other HR people, I always tell them, if there's going to be a termination or a layoff, do not do it at the end of the week, at the end of the day, Friday at 4:30, where you sweep the person out. Do it early in the day, early in the week. Tuesday morning at 10, not Friday afternoon at 4:45. A, it's disrespectful. B, people oftentimes, once they hear the shock of it, they need to talk. And if there's no one to talk to on Saturday and Sunday, then an unhealthy mind, let's face it, a lot of workplace violence happens on Monday mornings. Or they're just so angry that the lawsuit becomes a tool of workplace revenge because they feel like they've been stripped of their dignity, humiliated when they were most vulnerable. The language I've always taught HR people is like, look, when you terminate them, say things like, look, I'm so sorry this is happening. I thank you for everything you've done. You've been here for 2 years. We've been great comrades. We've worked together, and I'm sorry this is happening, but I want to let you know something. If you need help with your unemployment application or your COBRA application, I'm here. If you want to go over your resume, even if you want to do a resume, role play, whatever you're comfortable with, I'll always prioritize your call. You call me anytime. Let them heal. Let them get on with their lives. Don't make them feel that kind of body language. I can't believe the company did this, and they whisked me out the door on a Friday, and they didn't even say they were sorry it happened. Now, again, I'm Italian. I'm kind of a warmer fellow. I feel comfortable. If someone says, well, Paul, I'm not comfortable using those words, don't use the words. One of the books, the kind of my best-selling book, the one I'm best known for, is 101 Tough Conversations to Have with Employees. And what I tell them in that book is, look, I'm mapping out what it could sound like, but I'm not telling you to use it exactly. Telling you to have this kind of conversation with your employees, like telling you to have this kind of conversation with raising your kids. I don't know your kids. I don't know your parenting style, and I don't know how you were parented. But to the degree that you can take this template and customize it and make it your own so that you're comfortable, you will feel more comfortable addressing these kinds of things, which truthfully most managers tend to avoid. They look the other way, they sweep it under the rug until they have no choice. And by then the feelings are hurt or it's just too late.
I mean, it's really showing that you care about the whole person, not just what they deliver from, 9 to 5 and Monday to Friday. That's really what it's all about. It's taking people as whole people with whole lives and showing compassion.
How you hit the nail on the head, Howard. What I've told my employees is the same thing I tell them I've told my kids. I want for you what you want for you. Not I want for you what I want for me through you.
Mm-hmm.
But people can tell when they talk about this idea of, he's a sincere person, he's an honest person, he's a trustworthy person, whatever. That's, when you're working for a boss that has your back, even if you're going to get laid off, even if you're going to get terminated for cause, you still feel like, you know what? But the people piece of this was above all of that transactional stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be someone's favorite boss. I really do. I want to touch people's careers. There was someone on my team at Nickelodeon who was a manager of HR, who's now the senior vice president and CHRO of DreamWorks Animation. And she has said to me, Paul, I could have never gotten here without you. That's why we work, not for the paycheck and not for the benefits. It's for the ability to touch people's lives.
Right.
And I think to your point, Howard, when people feel that authenticity, they thrive. You just naturally do, as opposed to when you feel like your boss is in it for him or herself. You get very defensive, and there's only so much goodwill that you're willing to give in a circumstance like that.
Well, I'd like to comment on that because at one point I had a very successful business that I was one of the founders of. And what the beauty of that, I was the chief HR officer. So I was able to apply my own talent management strategies to my own company. And I enjoyed working with CompTeam because we utilized one of our sponsors' tools called the TMA, where we could analyze competencies, capabilities, drives, and also put it throughout our entire stage of the talent cycle for our employees. However, I also knew that this business was in an industry that changes. There's a lot of volatility in this industry. So on the day of hire, I would strategically talk to my employees strategically about what we could do to strengthen their capabilities, their competencies, to prepare for the unfortunate day that may come where the positions would be eliminated. And this was during the day of hire. So every single one-on-one, we talked about, let's do an assessment for you. Let's evaluate your ambitions, your career goals from a career mobility standpoint, and prepare that employee to get the skill sets in certain areas where they were maybe lacking, do some creative assignments and job shadowings and various things in different areas. So for example, one of my employees really was interested in compliance and ultimately became a compliance manager. So anyway, my question for you, Paul, is how do you feel about that approach? And also, I'm curious what you think about developing that strategy skill set for every level of the organization. When you talk about being above the trees and helping our employees and our leaders strategically, including career strategy, what do you think of that approach in a talent management approach?
Blows me away. I'm going to assume you had a lot of success with that, Shar.
Yes.
Because people are going to want to know that the company cares about them. So that's rule number one, right? It's not just what I can do for the company, but it's also what the company can do for me, right? It has to go both ways. So that's my initial cut. The second thing, though, which is so smart, is you're creating a mindset. And that mindset is so healthy because that will drive them through the remainder of their career. There are no jobs anymore that are guaranteed. There's no such thing. There really technically never has been, but a lot of us still kind of come from that world, especially those, where I saw my dad basically have one job his whole life. At my age, as a baby boomer, I was actually able to see that. My kids didn't see that with me because my jobs were eliminated a bunch of times. We've gone through massive cycles, economic changes. I started my career in the early 90s when we were dropping bombs in Iraq. I hate to say that, right? We saw the savings and loan crisis. 2001, we hit the dot-com bubble. 2008 with the mortgage. It's just been it's been crazy. It's been really, really hard. And the cycles are coming shorter and shorter. And for that reason, the kids will look and say, well, Dad killed himself, but, they didn't guarantee him anything. my point is your point. Teach them to fish. Don't give them the fish. Teach them to expect change, especially now. We are in technically Industrial Revolution 4, IR4, which began in 2016. It is the onset of the digital age with artificial intelligence and blockchain, machine learning, and everything else. We're at the equivalent right now of this is a wheel and this is fire. Let's see what you can do with it. I mean, that's literally where we are. We're starting all over again as a society on this planet. Teach them that change is okay. Teach them not to be afraid of it. And the most important thing you can say is, well, Paul, jobs are going to be eliminated. It's like, of course they will, but new jobs will be created too, where they want to kind of start focusing themselves. And what you did so brilliantly there, Shar, is teach them about that skill piece. Is it technical skills? Is it soft skills? Is it emotional intelligence? Whatever it happens to be, but keep them in that continuous learning mode. They'll always feel light on their feet. It'll build their self-confidence. It'll build their resiliency. They won't be afraid of getting laid off. And any employer that's willing to do that for them, again, think of what their needs are. They want career and professional development. What does that mean? It means that yeah, I'm learning new things. I'm building my resume and my LinkedIn profile, but I've also got an employer who's got skin in the game in terms of my best interests. And they're helping me find where my career interests lie and how do I exploit that and how do I stay ahead of the learning curve. I'm going to assume you had very low turnover in that organization because people aren't going to leave that for 20%. To go I can go somewhere else and get 20%. Yeah, but you also take the risk of finding a company that's all in it for them and not for you, or getting a manager who spits fire and throws chairs. That's not worth 20% because after taxes, you're not going to really see a difference. So I'm just saying the real retention is an emotional connection, both to the organization, but primarily to the boss. And it's also that learning curve. People want to feel like they're making a difference and they're learning from these things. And as they're building their own resumes and LinkedIn profiles, the retention rate is stronger at that point. It's not the opposite. It's not this idea of if they learn things, they're going to leave us. I think it was Richard Branson who said, teach them so that they can leave, but treat them so that they'll never want to leave or something along those lines. But that wisdom is there and you're just ahead of the curve. It's great.
So Sumit, I'm looking at you and it's me a lot of head nodding over there and smiling. So what are your thoughts there?
Definitely agree with the Branson quote, and what I see in the Indian context here is that leaders are really evolving, and we've traditionally been used to a very almost like a patriarchal form of leadership where leaders don't really express themselves. It's unheard of to be vulnerable in front of your people. So you're expected to show some sense of control. You're supposed to behave as if you've got it all figured out in your head. And with all the changes in the world that you spoke of, Paul, I've grown up through some of them, like 2001, 2008, and of course COVID. I think leaders have really had to step up and evolve, and sometimes it can almost feel like an unfair expectation to say that these leaders are like dinosaurs. So I think we sometimes do disservice to leaders as well, and we're not entirely fair in being a little too demanding. So it's very easy to say, the world is changing, so should you. But without giving them the tools, without enabling them to take the world forward, is it always really fair to ask too much of that?
Yes, I totally agree. The funny thing is, you have to always stay an individual contributor. 100 years ago, when you were on the Ford conveyor belt line and you were the line manager or the supervisor, that's really all you did. You told people what they needed to do. Nowadays, in a knowledge-based economy, you're an individual contributor. I don't know anyone out there who's a pure manager. Even the CEO isn't really a pure manager because they've got a lot of deliverables they have to do themselves. So what we're telling them is, okay, not only do you have to do your individual contributor role, which got you into management, congratulations, but now you have to worry about these 4 people on your team. And that's where it gets a little bit, without the right kind of training, to your point, the micromanagement kicks in, right? When they were individual contributors, they knew everything that was going on their desk or in their immediate area of responsibility. They can answer any question that anyone had. They knew exactly what they were working on. Now you say, okay, now you have 4 people who report to you and they become paranoid. Well, now I'm being measured by these 4 people and I have to be able to answer every question for my boss, should my boss ask me. And so that control, that uber control gene kicks in. And I've seen managers who say no one's allowed to send any emails out of this department without me being copied on them. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. But it's like, this is really where it can go. And my counseling to them is, first of all, you don't need to do that. You've got to give them traction to figure out the job, just like you had traction to figure out the job for yourself. And you've got to give them some room to run. But if you're going to manage them that closely with 4 people, I'm never going to give you 40 and you can forget 400. So you need to learn how to scale your career. And let me give you a suggestion of how to do that. Have lunch and learns with your team and talk about what's worked for you, what's working for them, what we can all agree on going forward as far as these particular aspects of the role, the customer care role, the technical support role, whatever it happens to be. Once you're all aligned and on the same page, you can sleep better at night. You still have the right to say, I don't want anything going out as a finished product that I haven't vetted or viewed. That's fine, but you can't manage each step of the way. You will give yourself a heart attack. You won't be able to scale your career and your employees are not going to have any fun with this whatsoever. So that's where the wisdom comes in. So I totally agree with you. I agree with that point of view that just minting them as a new manager without giving them the wisdom makes it very, very difficult for people to now feel like they have to do 2 things. They have to do their own job and now they have to worry about other people. And in a lot of companies, it's just like, here you go, do it. It's just not enough.
Well, I am not working in a traditional corporate setting, but as a chief HR officer of my organization, oftentimes the feedback, primarily clinical leaders, would tell me they didn't have the time to do the one-on-ones and the lunch and learns, that they were stretched too thin. Their bandwidth was way uncontrollable. And I'm hoping that with AI today that we can leverage the technology to help reduce our emails, to help streamline our office activities so that we can be on the floor and actually having those one-on-one conversations. So that if I have 40 employees, which oftentimes, unfortunately, many of our clinical leaders on average had at any given time, it was very difficult to even do a development plan with our employees, to have those face-to-face conversations, to talk about perhaps the crises that on an individual level that our employees were facing. So I think that this may be a positive. What are you thinking about that, Paul, as far as using AI and other technology to help us spend more time with our employees?
As long as it's an augmentation and not a replacement, it's fine, Shar. To me, if it can lighten things up and administratively, compartmentalize emails and save time and blah, this is fine. But I'll tell you this, you guys, this is what I've always talked about in my books because it worked for me throughout my career. When employees want career and professional development, that comes in 2 buckets. Bucket number 1 is recognition for a job well done. Okay. Everyone likes that. That's the psychic income that keeps people happy. I have too many managers who tell themselves these narratives that are silly. To be an effective manager, you must be feared. Wrong. I don't want to work for someone I'm afraid of. Okay. Or I never want to call out my people and say they're doing a great job. It's going to go straight to their head. They're going to want more money and they're going to want a bigger title. And I'm like, wrong on that one too. The psychic income piece is the recognition for a job well done or for extraordinary effort. I'm not saying giving it out to everybody just because they showed up, but when they earn it, give it. The second piece of that bucket, though, is giving real-time constructive feedback. They want to learn their craft. They want to master their trade. They want to learn their job. How do you give that feedback? And giving that feedback becomes a really critical piece here because it's not, again, as I said earlier, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And you can talk to people about difficult things like, I've got someone, quote unquote, with an attitude problem. Don't tell them you've got an attitude problem because those are fighting words. And you never want to document it because a court will invalidate the documentation and say that progressive discipline you gave the person doesn't even count. More importantly, don't use it verbally because, as I say, people may not say it, but they're going to think, I don't have a problem. You got an attitude problem. It's you, not me, right? And all of a sudden, they're not listening because they're fighting with each other. If you could say something to somebody like, Paul, look, they say the most important decisions in your career are going to be made when you're not in the room. That's the same for you as it is for me, as it is for everybody else. And I just feel like there's something that may be missing awareness that could potentially hold you back over your career when you're not in that proverbial room at some point in the future to defend yourself. Is it okay is it okay with you if I share with you what it looks like from my vantage point from time to time? And there you go. Now you can talk to them about things. I wouldn't, again, use the word attitude, but you can enter into a conversation that's structured in their best interests. And so they can get into that conversation. But again, to just finish my thought real quick, Shar, I would talk to my employees about, yeah, you have an annual review, but it's broken down into quarters. And every quarter you are responsible for two things. Number one, putting the time on my calendar. And number two, developing the agenda for the meeting. And I will give you guys a list of everything that I'm going to be looking for, including how you're doing towards your goals, including your career and professional development interests, in terms of where you think you might need more training, in terms of where you'd like to get greater organizational exposure, in terms of things you might want to do outside the organization as a community ambassador. Whatever is important to you at that point in time is something that I want to listen to. And to the degree that I can, I'm going to help you get there. But I would just, those touch bases didn't take any work or prep on my part. It was just putting them in a situation where they could motivate themselves, because I can't motivate you and you can't motivate me. All motivation is internal, but you can create the right in certain circumstances where people can motivate themselves. And I've always found that people enjoyed those meetings. At first they were like, I don't have time for that. After a while though, I got them thinking in terms of this achievement mindset. Like, what are you doing to decrease costs, increase revenue, save time, improve customer satisfaction? Qualify what you're doing in terms of one of those four things. Then we can even help work on quantifying it together, so you can put a bullet on your resume or on your LinkedIn profile. It's just a mindset change. So yeah, I think the artificial intelligence and the tools and the apps are going to help us with that, but you can't replace the human connection. More needed now than probably ever.
Thanks for that, Paul. Before we depart on this topic, I mean, one thing that you mentioned is that communication. It seems to be coming back to communication is critical in leadership. And we talked about really dropping some bad news upon people and taking them up to the 30,000 foot level. I want to dig into that a little bit more. So sometimes I find that we can bring people up to share some of the problem. Sometimes that can be shocking or quite alarming to them. You can scare your people, and then so I feel like is there a balance there of how you're delivering, or what you're sharing, the level of detail you're sharing?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a little bit of the brackets around it, Sam. I don't want to scare them either, but I also don't want to sugarcoat things. It's almost like the equivalent of when you have to give constructive feedback to someone, you need to give it to them in real time. Don't save it. Oh, we're going to do the annual review in 3 months. I'll cover it then. Don't do that. They need the feedback now. It's only fair to them. Now, if it turns out that I'm aware of something that I am at liberty to share with my team, I am going to want to make sure they hear it from me first and not from the corporate grapevine. But I'll also, again, I had written an article, I was a columnist for SHRM, and I had written an article on this idea of making it safe for employees to talk about personal things in the office in a controlled setting. And I opened it up saying, normally I would have never done this in my career. So if it's personal, it doesn't belong here. And I'm not asking them to talk about blue hats versus red hats. This is not what it's about. It's about how things are affecting you. So as an example, at the Motion Picture and Television Fund, when we were going through COVID full bore, now we were a retirement home, so the population was very vulnerable. And we lost residents, we lost patients, and we lost employees back in 2020. We had the National Guard on campus giving us nurses and doctors. And I mean, this was intense. The nation first found out about COVID from a retirement home up in Seattle, if you remember that. So the point was, my employees decided, everybody in our corporate office decided they would work remotely. But HR wanted to be there. And I really admired that and I respected that. They said, when our employees need us, we want to be here for them. So we did it that way. At the same time, there were so many changes coming down the pipe, changes in terms of the masking, in terms of the vaccinations, in terms of who got sick, who's in the hospital, who's on a vent. There was so much going on that you can feel in the room the sense of tension. And I would tell people on my team, you guys at 2:00, let's meet. Do me a favor. If you're all good at 2:00, let's just take 30 minutes. I just want to check in. And in that meeting, I would say, I just want to know how you're doing. If there's anything I could take off your desk to help you with this right now, get through this. If you need additional time off, you don't have to use your PTO or your vacation time. You can have time off. I know how hard you're working. I know how intense this is for you right now. Just let's talk about how we help each other and how we have one another's backs. And the funny thing, Sam, is not a lot of things came out of that. People didn't say, I want a day off tomorrow to go. I didn't get that. What I got was, Paul, I really appreciate the fact that you take the time to check in on us and make sure that we're okay. And again, that goes, I think, Howard, to what you were mentioning earlier. What's that expression? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. That caring piece is what drives it. It is a relationship-driven issue that keeps people loyal to a company, loyal to a boss. It's not on the right or left side of your brain. It's in your heart. And as long as you're coming from that sense of selflessness, that idea of what's known as servant leadership, from the John Greenleaf essay of the same name in 1970, he wrote The Servant Leader. That's 50 years ago. It's as relevant today, if not more so now, than it was back in 1970. They want people who can pay it forward, and they want people who can give that gift of themselves. The universe knows you can't give away anything you don't already have. So just by being able to give it away, it confirms for you that you have it. So the question for the employees on my team had always been, what do you have to give? See, this is the wisdom piece that I'm talking about. The mechanics of HR or whatever discipline you're in, you're the business owner of the company. That's fine. That's knowledge. Wisdom is knowledge applied. How do you take it so that people can see themselves in the light of giving things back and paying things forward and making of their lives a gift? Literally, that's what I tend to talk about. Now, not everyone has my same background or philosophy. I get that. But to the degree that you can get people to that point where they can find themselves, give people back to themselves, when you can do that, no matter what the conditions are, you could lead through any crisis. People will constantly seek you out because you're that calming voice. You're that reassured one. You're the confident one. And if you're the business owner, it's great if it's coming from you. Sometimes you won't have the luxury of that. You may be the head of HR and your CEO is freaking out, and that's who you report to, and you got to calm her down. That's fine. That happens too. But to the degree that you can define yourself through these difficult times, you make your life easier. You can still smile. You can still laugh. That's critical in today's day and age.
Definitely wise words there, Paul. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us today. Now, as we wrap up our discussion, what are the top things that you want leaders to walk away with from this discussion?
I think what I would say, Sam, is there's a reasonableness issue. Remember we talked earlier about this idea of, would you want to work for you? Or if the whole company followed your lead, would you be happy with where you took it? Don't come across as tone deaf. Quick example, the whole return to work thing. From what I've read, CEO surveys are saying that by late 2026, they're hoping that employees are going to be back to work regular full-time, as if COVID never happened. I don't know that that's ever going to be the case. I don't. But there are pros and cons to both sides of the argument. And to the degree that you can incorporate both sides of the argument in the communications that you're sending out via email, in your, how you're talking to your employees during your all hands meetings. It's like, look, as a CEO, I'm not worried about productivity paranoia. I trust you. But I do worry about the loss of our culture as an organization. I worry about collaboration. I worry about the idea of innovation. Can we innovate electronically the same way we can when we're sitting around the campfire, so to speak, talking to one another, laughing with one another? I'm also concerned about Gen Z. I've read the fact that Gen Z Zoomers are the loneliest, most isolated, and most depressed generation on the planet. COVID didn't help. And you guys, you need mentors. I needed a mentor when I grew up, and you don't have them, or it's much harder to have in that kind of environment. And for those of you working remotely, I know you've read the same things that I do, that if there's going to be a layoff, the remote employees are going to be the first ones to go because no one knows who they are. Mm-hmm. These are all real things, but what we think would make most sense for our organization at this point is we are back to 2 days a week. We think moving to 3 days a week would be healthy now. And what's important is we're going to do those days on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So everyone is together on those days.
Mhm.
We could be empty on Tuesday and Thursday. I don't care. But on the days that we're coming in, we all want to be here. There will be no meetings remotely. We're going to do them all in conference rooms, and we're going to spend some time getting to know one another better. Man, you give that kind of brilliance, you are going to get people biting because they're just happy about that. They want to work for that kind of organization.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. So we have our listeners out there that are saying, geez, I want to learn more about Paul. And I know that they can pick up one of your 17 books that you have to get a whole host of information. But if they would like to reach out and like to look into your services, Paul, how would you respond to that?
That's nice, Sam. Thanks. Everyone, I have a web page, which is just paulfalconehr.com. So easy enough there. I also have a blog. You can subscribe to the blog if you like this stuff. The other thing is I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Paul Falcone 1 is my name on LinkedIn. So reach out on LinkedIn. Feel free to visit the website. Feel free to, subscribe to the blog. Whatever I can do to help, be my pleasure. That's when 2 years ago, Sam, when I decided I'm going to do my own consulting firm, it's all in that spirit of giving back. This is the stuff that I love to do. I'm just fortunate that I'm able to do it because I've been preparing to launch my consulting firm for 30 years, at least in the back of my head. I'm fortunate I have a nice network, but I think the message resonates. Everyone wants to be a good guy. Everyone wants to be a good person despite the craziness that surrounds us these days. I'm just trying to get people back to themselves so they can find that inner peace, that peace of mind, that inner wisdom to help them lead others and touch other people's lives more effectively.
Great advice.
Well, thanks, Paul. It's been a true pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the People Strategy Forum. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everybody.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye.